Okay, so thanks very much. You're all very welcome. And the session here is really just going to focus on the information around the 1916 bursary scholarship and the support and documentation that the student needs or the applicant needs when they're making that application. So I'm just going to share screen here for the majority of our session here. I'm just going to show you a couple the website really where you can find this information, and then the main document that informs the applicants around all the necessary requirements around the support and documentation. So this piece, this is the Maynooth University Access Programme. This is their 1916 Bursary Fund. This is the page that Maynooth has on their website. So as you can see, it has all the details about the bursary, what's needed before you start, application timeline, data protection, frequently asked questions. So you'll get a ton of information there that gives you all the kind of necessary overview in order to fully understand where you're at, if your application will be a valid application, and if your circumstances fit the categories of applicant that the 1916 bursary is trying to support. So this is probably just to give a brief start on this piece around the target groups, or the particular the groups that the 1916 bursary is aimed at. You can see it here, who can apply for the bursary, and here's our groups here under the bullet points. So we've got people who are from socio-economic groups that have low participation in higher education, either eligible for the highest level of SUSI or being received of the Department of Employment Affairs and Social Protection means tested social welfare payment. So applicants really need to be, you know, they need to be one of these, they need to fall into one of these categories, and if so, fall into one or more of these categories to really give yourself an opportunity to be one of the very few people that do get the 1916 bursary. So it's for first-time mature students, it's for students with disability or with a disability, particular students with physical mobility impairments, students with a sensory disability, or students who are deaf, hard of hearing, and students who are blind or visually impaired, Irish travellers, people entering university on the basis of a further education award, lone parents with a Department of Education or Department of Employment and Affairs and Social Protection means tested social welfare payment, ethnic minorities, refugees, or people who are in the care of the state. So these are the categories of groups that the 1916 bursary is specifically aimed at. And the reason we're kind of touching on these at the moment is because some of the documentation that you will be required to provide, it relates to the group that you have identified, or the group that you have categorized yourself as. So I'll just show you now in relation to the information specifically around the documents, but that's the piece around the groups that we are supporting through the 1916 bursaries. Now, okay. The joys of Zoom and moving windows around. And I know I've a couple of great colleagues that are here with me today in the audience. I know Ayoma, Martha, and Gemma, a few there. So you might, if you're, I think the guys are already answering questions for me there as well, which is fantastic. So really appreciate that. So the support and documentation document, so to speak. I've taken this one from the Maynooth University website as well, and I'll be able to post this link in the chat function for everybody as well. So to start with, really the support and documents that you're submitting for the bursary are to support the claim that the household income or your household income is below the income threshold that's been set for the bursary, which is just under 24,000, which is the rate that replicates the highest rate of recipient for the SUSI grant. So some supporting documents will be required to provide information around your household income, and then there are other supporting documents that will be required to classify or clarify the target group that you have said you can be categorized as. Okay, so there's the two kind of the documentation that you're providing relates to household income and the group that you've identified, or groups that you've identified as being a part of. Okay, so I'm going to just talk you through the form here. It's readily available, but I suppose it's just to give people a bit of a chance to kind of discuss or to hear us, to hear the representative from the college just describing what exactly we mean by it, and to give people that bit of clarity. So in relation to our income documents, in relation to any applicant that is in receipt of SUSI, so if you've been accepted for the Student Universal Support Ireland, then there's no need for you to provide support and documentation in relation to your household income. Okay, so as you can see here in the further information, if you've applied to SUSI, the MEND cluster, that's the 4 colleges again that we're referring to, with your consent, verify your finance eligibility directly with SUSI. So if you consent, you do not have to provide any further financial documents to support your application. You can indicate your consent on section 3, page 7 of the online application. So that's where you'll see that now on Monday. You'll have that, you'll have an option to provide consent for us to kind of make sure to validate your income claim in relation to your SUSI application. If you have not applied to SUSI, you are required to submit relevant financial documentation with the online application. The MEND cluster will conduct a financial assessment then. So please see below the supporting documents to provide in this case. So I suppose there'll probably be a lot of people who are here with us, and a lot of students who are in receipt of SUSI and who won't be required to provide those income documents. But the 1916 bursary is quite an expansive scholarship in terms of who can apply for it. So part-time students can apply for it. You might be a student who maybe before you've done 1 year in a college course and you got SUSI for that, in a degree course, and you got SUSI for that 1 year, and you're not able to get it for the first year of this course. So you don't have SUSI this year, but you might get it next year, but yet you were a valid candidate to apply for the 1916 bursary. So you need to kind of get this income documentation ready for this application, right? And so this is the option B. So you are not a SUSI recipient, you're not going to apply to SUSI, or you've been refused SUSI. So the documentation that you're going to be asked for, it will depend on your income, your household income, and how that's made up. And then, so if it is that you've been received, yourself or your parents or guardians are in receipt of the Department of Social Protection payments, then you will need to provide full Department of Social Protection payments statements of payments, breakdown dated from the 1st of January to the 31st of December 2020. So you'll need to get a statement from the social welfare stating the full payments to yourself or your parents or guardians for last year. And then some further information, you can request a social welfare statement through mywelfare.ie, or you can drop into your local Intrio office and request it there. Now, this can be tricky enough. And if you have to get documentation for parents or guardians, quite often it can vary between social welfare office, but it might be best if the parent or guardian can go in and request that. It can speed things up a little bit. But this would be something that if you're in a position where you need to get this documentation, we'd really recommend that you start having a look into it over the weekend and maybe getting onto mywelfare.ie, and you could be able to do it a lot quicker online. Now, if you're self-employed income, you're going to need a notice of assessment, self-assessment letter, and you can get details of this online, and you can request all of this for 2020 from the relevant person's revenue account or at the revenue website. A lot of people who are self-employed will have their own accounts they've been managing over the year, so there's probably quite a bit of work to be done in relation to that. I know this timing of the year can be a little bit difficult in terms of when the end of year accounts tend to be gathered for people who are self-employed. It might be a little bit early in the year for when you'd be used to doing that process. So again, if any of yourself, your own income, or your parent or guardian's income is made up of self-employment, it's worth having a look at this over this weekend to see what type of information that you're going to be required to submit. And then if the income is from PAYE, it's from paid employment, you need a statement of liability, formerly called end of year statement, or P21 is what most of us will remember it being called, for 2020. And again, this can be requested from a relevant person's revenue account on the revenue website, www.revenue.ie. So again, you would need yourself, parents or guardians, details, a PPS number, set up an account with revenue.ie, and you just go through. It's like an online process of going on and requesting those P21 documents that you'd need. So again, all of these things, they just take a little bit of time. They take a little bit of work and effort. You know yourselves, you're registering, like with any website, you're registering an account, and then you've got to get into it then and navigate your way around to actually request the specific documentation that you need. So like we said, a little bit of work in it. And then you may be receiving the Vocational Training Opportunity Scheme, a VTOS payment last year. And if so, then we need a letter from an educational training board, your ETB or your post-leaving cert college or PLC college, where the person, the applicant who is attending, confirming the total amount that they earned. That's in 2020. So the letter must be on headed paper, signed and dated by an official with the ETB PLC you previously attended. Now, in reality, that probably means making a visit to the ETB or the PLC that you attended, and dropping up to reception. And realistically, it would need to be the individual who is receiving that payment going in there and bringing some ID and requesting that they give you the letter stating that. Hopefully, again, it would depend on the ETB and the PLC, how busy they are, how things are going for them, whether or not they'd be able to get that printed out for you there and then, or whether they'll be able to post it out to you. So that's the full kind of, spectrum, or the full gamut of the income documentation that is required. And again, as we've said, if you're receiving SUSI, if you've been confirmed that you're in receipt of SUSI, you don't need to worry about the income documentation. If you're not in receipt of SUSI, or SUSI haven't confirmed that they will be they haven't accepted your application yet, or fully confirmed it, well then there's a bit of work to be done around the documents that you need to get. So that's the income strand of documents that are required. The second strand of documents that are required, then these are these are related to the target groups that you have identified with in your application. And I suppose it's worth saying that the 1916 bursary it's a scholarship that is aimed at supporting individuals who have what is defined as an intersectional experience of disadvantage. And that means that the groups that we have, the target groups that are laid out, these are groups that are underrepresented in higher education. And what we mean by an intersectional experience of disadvantage is that an individual can categorize themselves as being from a number of those target groups. So if a lone parent with a disability has a level of intersectional disadvantage in that they have the experience of those two groups. So their access and engagement with higher education can often be affected by those particular characterizations. And that's what the bursary itself is aimed at, trying to kind of provide that support, or a significant financial support, so that that individual can then hopefully have one, I suppose, have that financial backing then in order to help them succeed through their higher education journey. So bear with me, it's only a couple more pages, but as you'll see, there's depending on the group that you are ticking the box to say, yes, I have this experience, or this is my experience, you will be required to get some documentation related to that. Brilliant. I can see the gang are my colleagues Ayoma and Gemma and Martha and Emer are doing a great job on answering questions there. Brilliant. So from the beginning, target group. So if you're saying that you have a disability, your support and documentation that will be required. And again, I'm reading this out, so I hope people are okay with that. And I will put the link back in the chat function for it, so that people can that can click on it and go through it themselves then again. So if you were deemed eligible for the 2021 Disability Access Route to Education scheme, your disability information will be verified directly with your institution. With your consent, then you are not required to submit support and documentation regarding your disability. If you've carried forward your DARE eligibility, upload a copy of your DARE eligibility carried forward email letter. So you can indicate your consent on section 4, page 8 of the online application. And so that then again, it's similar to the SUSI element of the application. If you came through the DARE access route, you'll be able to provide consent to the college to confirm that you've been assessed around disability through the DARE piece, through the DARE scheme. If you did not enter college through DARE, but are registered with the Disability Support Service, we can verify this directly with your institution, with your consent. Then you are not required to submit support and documentation regarding your disability. So documentary evidence from a relevant medical professional confirming your disability condition diagnosis as per the DARE guidelines and documentary evidence, or the Fund for Students with Disability guidelines. So if you're appealing, you may also provide a letter confirming your registration with the college's disability support. If you cannot or do not consent to the MEN cluster verifying that you have a disability with your college, you are required to provide appropriate documentary evidence from a relevant medical professional as per the DARE guidelines. So if you're linked to the scheme, the DARE scheme, or if you're linked with the college and the institution already, you can provide consent to enable the college to confirm that recognition of the disability, of your disability. But if you do not provide consent, or if you cannot, or if you do not have connections with those schemes, well, then you will need to provide documentary evidence from a relevant medical professional as per the DARE guidelines. So there's a little bit of work in that over the coming weeks for people that might be selecting disability as a category for their application. So if you're a member of an ethnic minority, an official letter from the Department of Justice and Equality confirms specific right and permission to remain, or naturalization of applicant and or parent / dependent. Or a photocopy of passports. This is to include the applicant's passport, and if necessary, a copy of the applicant's parents, guardians, country of origin passport, an Irish EU, EAA or Swiss Confederation passport if possible. Or a copy of the applicant's Irish residency permit, the IRP, that details your visa stamp details. And there's a link there for more information. So an ethnic minority, as determined by the Higher Education Authority for the purpose of this fund, is a national of a member state, a state which is a contracting state to the EEA agreement or the Swiss Confederation, or a person whose current immigration status or leave to remain under the Department of Justice and Equality for the purpose of this fund, as defined on page 8 to 10 and the guidelines. So those guidelines will be made available as well. So for further clarification, you can see these sections around the regulations, and only documentation from official state departments, the Department of Justice particularly, will be accepted to prove the applicant's right to remain. So if again, the category that you are applying, or one of the categories that you are applying for the bursary, is you're a member of an ethnic minority, again, there will be documentation required then to validate that categorization. So there are two of our target groups so far: disability, member of ethnic minority, and then the third target group is if you are categorizing yourself as an Irish traveller. Well then, if you self-declare that you're a member of the traveller community, you are not required to provide supporting documentation as part of the online application. However, you may be asked to provide further information later. So just to be aware of that. Our fourth target group then are a lone parent on a Department of Social Protection payments, your DSP payment. So the documents that are required for, if you're categorizing as a lone parent, we need evidence of being in receipt of a long-term social protection one-parent family payment in 2020. So you'll need to go to your social welfare office again and request receipt, a statement about being in receipt of the one-parent family payment for 2020, or evidence of being in receipt of a long-term social protection payment for one-parent transitional payment in 2020, or a letter from your Department of Social Protection stating that the applicant is currently or was formerly on a one-parent family payment and met the criteria of a lone parent. So you can request statements from, similar again to the income piece, you can request a statement on mywelfare.ie or from your local community welfare inter-office. If you are on a follow-on DSP payment, please request a full statement of when you were on a one family payment, or one parent family payment. So as you can imagine, an applicant for the 1916 bursary may have been receiving the one parent family payment a couple of years ago and is no longer on that payment, but by being able to access a document in relation to that payment, then that would confirm your categorization of being a lone parent for a period, for that period, and then being able to kind of validate your application underneath that category. So the letter confirming you are a lone parent must be from the Department of Social Protection and be on headed paper, stamped and signed by the DSP official. Note there are some examples of follow-on one-parent family payments. So as we mentioned, if you had been on the one-parent family payment and then you moved on, these are some of the payments that you might have moved on to, and then it's just around getting that statement around the one-parent family payment. So our fifth target group, we're nearly there. I know this is kind of, there's a lot of information to take on. So fifth group is if you're a first-time mature student. So if this is the first time you are attending a level 7 or level 8 degree in one of these four colleges, you're entitled to apply for the 1916 bursary. And if that's the case, you don't have to provide support and documentation that you are a first-time mature student. This will be verified by your higher education institution and or SUSI, so it can get verified in a different way, different format. If you are QQI entry, so that's if you're an entrant coming through the further education and training program, so if you've come from doing a level 5 or level 6 PLC and post-leaving cert college program, if you've come that access route and you're a category of one of those students, then again, you're not required to provide support and documentation, because again, this can be verified by the education institution. Then nearly there. So if you are here eligible, so that's if you were if you had applied for the HERE scheme is the higher education access route, and so that it's mainly for leaving cert students. So if you were deemed eligible for the 2021 higher education access route HERE scheme, this information will be verified directly with your college institution and with your consent. then again, so there'll be a piece where you can give consent for the college to verify this, and then again, you won't be required to submit supporting documentation for that. You can indicate your consent then in the terms and conditions on the application. So another category then is if you're living in an area that experiences socio-economic disadvantage, again, you are not required to provide supporting documentation that you are living in an area that experienced socio-economic disadvantage, and this will be verified by an external geocoding company using your air code. So when you make your application, you'll be providing your air code, and through the air code, there is a spatial analysis map that the government uses called the Pubble area, spatial analysis area, and that classifies different geographical locations, and that classification is based on the census data that we do every 5 years, every 4 or 5 years, and that census data then kind of confirms certain demographic aspects of areas around the income, the type of jobs that the majority of people have in the area, how many people in the area are accessing social welfare payments, what levels of education are in that area, and through a collection of all of that data, an area is designated, whether it is, as you're coming across these kind of terms quite a lot now, whether an area is designated as advantaged or whether it's designated as disadvantaged. So all of that will be verified through your air code and by providing that consent then as well. So our additional indicators then in relation to support and documentation. So if the applicant was in the care of the state, so it's another element of our target groups, a letter from TUSLA, an official associated agency confirming the dates the applicant was in the care of the state, can be provided. And again, so this is around, as we mentioned, this intersectional element. So you could be a student who has just come from FETAC level 5 course and are now starting your first year degree. So you're ticking both of those categories in that you're a QQI student, an FET student, and you have had experience, you've been in the care of the state, and you are classified under those two categories. And that's that intersectional piece around the target groups that 1916 Bursary is aimed at. So for that, you would be providing your documentation for the QQI, the FET, that's verified through the institution, but for the classification around being in the care of the state, you would need this piece here around the letter for the an official associate from TUSLA. So all letters must be on headed paper, signed and confirmed that the applicant is or was in the care of the state. And to request the documentation, contact your HSE social worker, your local TUSLA area officer, and our TUSLA aftercare worker, and you can get more information there as well. So as you can see, this was, I suppose, a couple of reasons why there could be some people in the audience here that maybe are looking at this and they're going, okay, the categories that reflect my or who I am and the experience, my I suppose the groupings that I would fall under, you might be looking at it and saying, oh, well, I actually don't have to provide any support and documentation. So one such example would be if you were a mature student who is a traveller and who has been accepted for SUSI for this year. Well, then, you know, by our support and documentation, you just need to provide your application, and there's no support and documentation required. However, if you're a student who has, you know, you might be a part-time student who's come through, who is a lone parent and who maybe was in the care of the state previously, well, then there's quite a lot of documentation required there in terms of, if you're part-time, you won't have the SUSI grant, so you'll have to get the income documentation. You'll need to get the documentation around your lone parent pay, or the one parent family payment, and then you'll need the documentation around the letter from TUSLA here in relation to the dates when you were in the care of the state. So it can vary from applicant to applicant what the requirement is, and as we pointed out there with that example, some applicants will be required to get quite a lot of documentation. So again, if you find that that's the circumstances, please link in with the access department in the college that you're linked with, and we'll do our very best to kind of support you in that. You know, we can go through any of these pieces again with you to help you get that clarity around, right, what do I need to do, what documents do I need to get, who do I need to talk to in order to make that process as speedy as I can. So just other additional indicators. So if the applicant, I'm just moving down here, if the applicant was living in or is transitioning out of direct provision accommodation, again, a letter from the Department of Justice or Equality or a registered direct provision centre confirming that the applicant previously lived or is transitioning out of direct provision, or a full Department of Social Protection statement from 2020 showing the applicant was in receipt of the daily expenses allowances. So letters from direct provision centres must be on headed paper and signed by a direct provision official, and you can request the 2020 social protection statements from mywelfare.ie. Again, this is one of those elements of around this intersectional experience that we're referring to. So if you're an applicant that has, you know, some of the other categories, and you have had the experience of living in or being in direct provision, well, then informing the college of that, it expands the range of target groups that the individual applicant has the experience and is connected with, and so that again underscores that intersectional experience that this person has had. So nearly there, our last two boxes. So an applicant who is or was previously in supported accommodation. So supported accommodation is requires a letter from the Health Service Executive, TUSLA, or a registered charity agency confirming the applicant is or was previously living in supported accommodation. All letters must be on official headed paper again. And so if the applicant who is or was previously homeless, a letter from the Health Service, TUSLA, or a registered charity agency confirming the applicant is or was previously homeless. So the examples like this would be maybe a letter from the Peter McVerry Trust if an individual was living in emergency accommodation, or if somebody was residing in maybe one of the assisted supported accommodation. So I know that the Salvation Army has some supported accommodation residencies, and so a letter from that agency then would provide support that was the person's living arrangements. Okay, so that's the full document. I'm going to copy the piece here, and I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to post. I'm going to post the link in there now, and I might just stop the recording here. That's just the whole document gone through. Please, that document is available and will be available on each of the 4 colleges' access websites: Dundalk IT, DC, Dublin City University, Maynooth University, and Athlone IT. So you'll be able to get access to that document and really assess categories that relate to you and your application and what documentation is required.